Having looked at the definition of literature, it is also important that we concentrate on the characteristics that distinguishes and differentiates literature from every other subject. Okay? Like I said in the course of my introduction, I made you to understand that literature uses language just the same way every other subject uses language. So if we leave it at that point, it will be difficult for us to distinguish between the subject literature and every other subject. So our focus now is to look at the peculiarities, the things that distinguishes a literature from every other subject. One is that literature has to do with imagination. It has what? It has to do with imagination. One, you need to know that literature thrives essentially on imaginative constructs, which means that it is a form of composition that relies heavily on the composer's or writer's mental journey. It relies solely on the writer's mental journey. When a writer writes or sits to write, he writes basically from his mind. Even though he may have observed something out there, but he writes from his mind. And then he constructs and creates characters which interface among themselves, and these characters are the characters with which he passes his message across. So literature is imaginative, even though it dwells on actual facts. For the writer to be able to write effectively, he relies on his mental journey that take him beyond the realms of the given to a world of fantasy of the mind. So he creates. He's in a world of his own when he's writing. Feels the world. He gets things within the world. Everything happens within his mind, and then he's able to imagine the story and then he puts it down. Literature has to basically do with imagination. It has to do what? It has to do with imagination. Writers have taken their audience or readers to high heavens. They've taken readers to high heavens. They've painted heaven on earth. At some point, you see a writer who paints a picture that you begin to ask yourself if this is on earth or somewhere else that you've never been to before. You see animals speak. Animals will begin to talk in human language and even understands better than human. What do you call that? Have you ever seen where animals begin to lead themselves and interact like humans form a government? No. All these are in the infringement of the imagination of the writer. So the writer uses the mind to create stories. And that is why we say imagination is one key characteristic that differentiates literature from every other subject.